What's up, Transformers fans? I'm Mondo, and welcome to another Moonbase 84 transmission. I often say on the channel that I'm a fan and not an expert, but what I mean by that is that I've been a Transformers fan since there were Transformers to be a fan of. With that being said, I don't claim to know every single piece of lore, be it from past comics or cartoons. Lately, being a fan and not an expert has been really awesome because I finally sat down and watched the first series in the Japanese continuation of the original G1 cartoon, Transformers The Headmasters. To get it out of the way, I really enjoyed this show, and I figured to share some of my thoughts about it with you, and if you haven't checked it out yet, you might. But before I do, it's time for all that YouTube jazz, so please hit the like button, subscribe, and ding that notification bell to help a guy's channel out. I'd really appreciate it. Now, let's talk about the G1 bonus goodness for us Americans, that is the Japanese Transformers Headmasters. To start things off, it took me longer to check out the Headmasters than I wanted it to, and that's because of the English dubs I was able to find are atrocious. I don't have a problem watching with English subtitles though. That came down to just finding the time to do so. I feel like it always takes me longer to watch with subtitles for some weird reason. I say this because I know some people don't care for subtitles, but if you want to watch the show and have it be enjoyable, trust me, don't watch with the English dub. Watch with subtitles, or at least learn Japanese to really get the true experience of the show. I will also say that at first it was hard to get into the show, and that was because if you're like me and grew up with the G1 cartoon, it is very odd hearing the characters sound so different either with the dub or in Japanese. The voices from the original show are so ingrained in my head that my brain was getting all messed up seeing those characters on screen and hearing different voices coming from them. Luckily, I was able to persevere, and after a while, due to how the story goes, it ended up not being a problem. Speaking of the story, I know that this show is almost 40 years old, so the statute of limitations has expired years ago for spoilers, but because there are always new fans to the franchise, as well as fans who simply haven't checked out the Headmasters, I'm going to give it a brief synopsis of the plot instead of spoiling the whole thing. Like all cartoons that are 80s goodness, the story is simple but effective for what it is. The show ignores the Transformers The Rebirth miniseries that we got in America, which was effectively our season 4. The choice for the Headmasters to do this was a good choice in my opinion. In America, the Headmasters were Transformers who paired with Nebulons and humans. The latter two wore robot exosuits and would transform into the head of their Cybertronian counterparts. Even as a kid, I thought this was odd. The Transformer not being able to do anything without their humanoid counterparts didn't make sense to me even back then. Also, how could the Nebulons or humans have any kind of life? The Headmasters handled this much better. The title characters, the Headmasters, come from the planet Master. And yes, it's a cheesy name, but we're talking the 80s here. And they are smaller Cybertronians that fled to the planet Master during the Great War. Eventually, they learned how to build bigger bodies called Transtectors and transformed into the heads of them. Long story short, in America, you had the humanoid counterpart that makes the head with his own name, but also the body of the Cybertronian, which had his name, while in Japan, the Headmaster is the actual name of the Transformer. The story effectively picks up after Season 3 of our American G1 cartoon. The Decepticons are based on Char and the Autobots occupy Cybertron. The Decepticons start the show off trying to gain control of Vector Sigma on Cybertron, and the Autobots of course are fighting to stop them. Not long after the show starts, the Autobot Headmasters arrive from Planet Master to help fight the Decepticons, led by their commander Fortress. Now when Fortress transforms into the head of his giant robot base / battle cruiser, of course he becomes Fortress Maximus. And of course, to sell even more toys, the Decepticons have evil citizens from the Planet Master, the Decepticon Headmasters, which are led by Zarek or Scorponok. Throughout the show's 32 episodes, many battles ensue, as a good action cartoon about giant robots is wont to. Remember how I said it was wonky to hear the tried and true characters with different voices? That mostly goes away because most of them go away, so the Headmasters and newer characters can take the spotlight. I absolutely love this direction. By doing this, the creators gave us a chance to see characters that did very little in seasons 3 and 4 and gave them more agency. They also put characters that previously didn't make it into the cartoon. It's a win-win. The fans get to see new characters on screen and they get to sell more toys. Obviously, we got to see more of the Headmasters in the show, but also the Target Masters. We also got some brief time with characters like the Monster Bots and Terrorcons. I freaked out when the Autobot and Decepticon clones showed up later in the series. I loved those toys as a kid, and seeing them on TV was awesome. We also got to see characters that were based on toys that were only available in Japan, namely the Combiner Team Trainbots who form Raiden. And I really liked the Trainbots. They were really cool, and it was just awesome to see a train flying through outer space. For me, other characters of note were Chrome Dome. He was a hot rod kind of character, racing into things without thinking, but throughout his story arc, he tempered that more and more and became a great mentor and leader. I enjoyed his story arc the most out of everything else in the show. It was so well done. Six Shot went from a really cool toy to being a very interesting character on screen. We barely got a glimpse of him on screen in America, but he is a main character in Headmasters. How can a 7 mode ninja transformer not be awesome? He also had an interesting story arc where towards the end you thought maybe he was going to give up the Decepticon ways. There were some characters that I didn't mind their American interpretations but found super annoying in the Headmasters and vice versa. Daniel, for instance, was perfectly fine in the US but is absolutely annoying in Headmasters. He's basically in the show to whine and to get into trouble, so the Autobots have to abandon important matters to rescue him. Although I did like the episode where Daniel and Six Shot were marooned on a planet together. I thought Wheelie was a fun character in the '86 movie, but in season 3 I couldn't stand him. He was Daniel's buddy like Bumblebee was with Spike. The problem for me was his rhyming in the movie was funny. In the cartoon it got overbearing. I don't know Japanese, but as far as I could tell, he dropped the rhyming in Headmasters, and although not the best character, he was much more tolerable. I also want to note that RC was in the show throughout its entirety, but unfortunately didn't really do anything, and that is a shame. If you ever watched anime, then you know there is usually a duo of buffoons for comedy relief, and sadly in Headmasters, that falls on Cyclonus and Scourge. I wish they had kept them serious and as a real threat to the Autobots. I won't spoil the series ending, but I will say that I found it to be kind of lackluster. The plot had built up to what seemed to be an epic finale, but fell very short on that promise. There were a few plot points that I wanted to see fulfilled. Hopefully I see some resolution in the follow-up series Transformers Master Force, which I've just started watching. I also want to point out that the Headmasters has the same quirkiness in the department of things like animation mistakes that G1 is known for, so don't go into the series expecting a great quality improvement. Because I grew up with the G1 cartoon, it doesn't bother me. I find it kind of charming and often funny. To wrap things up, when it comes to Transformers The Headmasters, I'm glad that I'm a fan and not an expert. As a 40-something-year-old guy, it was awesome to watch the continuation of the G1 cartoon as if I was a little kid again. I even watched most of the show on Saturday mornings eating my bowl of cereal. It took me back to a simpler time where every little detail in a cartoon wasn't scrutinized on the internet and people watch cartoons to have fun. And the show is a fun ride. I had a blast with Transformers The Headmasters, and I'm hoping the joy continues with Master Force. If you are an old school G1 person who happens to have not watched Headmasters, I say give it a go. If you are a Transformers fan in general that hasn't checked it out, I say check it out as well. That puts this video in the books. I'm off to do some adulting so I can continue watching Master Force. When I finish up that series, I'll let you know what I thought. As always, comment your opinions below, but just please be respectful. And as always, thanks for docking.